What's up guys, my name is Ace, and yesterday we got the big patch that adjusted a bunch of headshot multipliers, visual recoil was significantly reduced, sniper rifles got a pretty massive buff, and there was also a bunch of other changes to things like idle sway and weapon bob across the board. And then on top of that, there were actually some key bug fixes, so a lot going on with this update from yesterday. So let's dive right into this with the visual recoil reduction. And there were actually a bunch of different elements that go into this, and there were a bunch of other improvements when it comes to like how your weapon moves as you move around the map. I couldn't possibly cover every single one of these in great detail with before and after footage, but the primary thing to point out here is our visual recoil differences. So let's have a look at some side-by-sides. So let's first have a really close comparison here of the recoil with the XM4 pre-patch versus post-patch, and I mainly want you to focus on the gun itself and how much it's moving as you're kicking, and also how much it deviates from that center point that I've laid out for you. As you can see pre-patch, that gun is bouncing all over the place, it's rotating a lot as well as it's kicking, and it's often jumping above and below that center line, whereas post-patch, sure, you will see your front sight deviate a little bit from there, but you're not seeing nearly as much gun rotation as well as other weapon movement, and it's a lot easier to focus on that front sight as you're shooting your target. And this actually makes quite a big difference. Keeping in mind, this didn't just apply to the XM4, this applies to all of the guns in the game, but you're gonna notice it most with full auto guns. And while this is a great change for everybody, this was especially great for mouse and keyboard players out there, and this looks amazing. Now, one big thing to keep in mind here is this change in particular didn't actually directly affect your recoil pattern at all. This is just the visual portion of your recoil. It will make it easier to shoot and see your target, but this itself didn't reduce recoil. However, there may be a slight adjustment to the actual experience recoil across the board due to the idle sway improvement. So let's have a quick look at that as well. This is something that applied to everything aside from sniper rifles. Sniper rifles got a separate change, which we will be covering. But essentially, as you can see here, when aiming down sights, not only is the delay before your idle sway kicks in much higher, it's now 2.2 seconds, which is quite a bit higher than it was pre-patch. But on top of that, the amount of idle sway that you experience by default is a lot less. This is using an XM4, just in case you're wondering, but this applies to all of the guns aside from sniper rifles, like I said. And in this game, idle sway does continue to happen as you're firing your gun, and as a result, you actually might see some very slight improvements to recoil plots across the board. Now, these are generally going to be very minimal. The actual recoil pattern and path and your ability to control recoil is really going to be the same. It's just that you might see very slightly less deviation in some cases. So that's the idle sway changes for the regular guns. What about sniper rifles? Well, what they've done here is a really big adjustment that now makes it so when you aim down sight, idle sway turns off entirely rather than just being reduced by 50%, which is what it did pre-patch. And what this means is you now aim down sight perfectly to the center of your screen, at least for that initial moment when you get aimed down sights, and then your idle sway will kick in and you'll start swaying around just as much as you did pre-patch. And this is quite a big change compared to pre-patch. As you can see there, I'm never really aiming down sight to the center of that bell. It's always somewhere off target, and then it's immediately swaying the moment I get aimed down sight. It's already swaying. That's just not happening anymore, and this was a very significant buff to sniper rifles in this game. And there we go. Those are the idle sway improvements, and I should also mention the target laser was also buffed. Your idle sway delay is now 2.9 seconds on all weapons when using this laser, and that's quite a long time in Call of Duty terms. Now, as for a few other changes, on Hacienda, they adjusted some of the spawn logic. With Face Off, they adjusted a lot of our score values to make the games last a little bit longer since they are so quick. And this applies to Domination, Kill Order, Kill Confirmed, and Team Deathmatch. We saw a similar story with 10v10 Mosh Pit. They also increased the score limits for Kill Confirmed and Team Deathmatch. And for Prop Hunt, they increased the prop movement speed for all of the props aside from the extra large ones. They reduced the round limit timer down to 3 minutes from 4 minutes. And they also enabled Prop Hunt in private matches. After that, on Nuketown Holiday, there was a green visual effect that was attached to players during a match. That has now been fixed. And now, let's get into the weapon-specific adjustments, most of which were headshot adjustments. And with the assault rifles, let's start off with the XM4. And the first thing they did here is they actually eliminated our first damage range. However, our 5-shot kill potential is exactly the same as it was pre-patch. But what this does, combined with the headshot changes, they also buffed our base headshot multiplier and the CHF barrel headshot multiplier, is this now makes it so within that entire 5-shot kill range, all the way out to 40 meters, we're now getting the same headshot potential that we previously had just out to 16 meters. So that's actually quite a nice buff to headshots, although it's still going to require 3 headshots mixed in with a body shot to get a 4-shot kill, unless you're using that CHF barrel. And then we can also see at longer ranges, it's now going to take us 1 fewer headshot to kill, both with or without the CHF barrel. So if you're using the CHF barrel, it's now just 1 headshot mixed in with body shots to help, which is nice to see. And I just want to point out, as as I'm going through these graphics, anytime there was a headshot improvement, there will be a little green box around the specific area where there is a headshot improvement. And hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to track what's going on, because I realize these charts can be a little bit information overload at times. But next up, let's get into the AMES 85, and with this, they kind of did the opposite with our ranges. They added a new damage range, again, without affecting our 5-shot kill potential at all. And with this new range, which extends out to just past 15 meters, we get better headshot potential. We now only need 2 headshots mixed in with body shots to get a 4-shot kill there. Whereas previously, you had to land all 4 headshots to get a 4-shot kill without the CHF barrel. So nice improvement there, just within 15 meters. And then you can also see our headshot multipliers have improved with or without the CHF barrel, which gives us better headshot potential in most cases here with the AMES 85. Now on top of that, with the CHF barrel on the AMES 85, they slightly reduced the vertical recoil penalties you'd see from 50% down to 45%, so that's yet another improvement there. Then with the GPR-91, this one got some much needed improvements to our headshot potential. However, the first thing I want to point out is our maximum damage range was very slightly reduced, although our 5-shot kill potential to the body was unchanged. But across the board here, we see headshot improvements on this gun. And up close, without the CHF barrel, we only need 2 headshots mixed in with 2 body shots for a 4-shot kill. And with the CHF barrel, we only need 1 headshot mixed in. So that's a lot of power. And this is one of the few cases where I would really seriously consider using the CHF barrel for an optimal setup with the GPR-91. And I think that's much needed for this gun since it does have quite a slow base time to kill potential to the body. But at every single range, whether you're using the headshot barrel or not, you're going to be seeing improvements here to headshots. However, to compensate for that, we do see more recoil now with the CHF barrel compared to pre-patch, which I think is totally fair. After that, we saw the Goblin MK2, and the first thing with this was a pretty significant buff to close-range fights. They added a new maximum damage range out to 16.5 meters without affecting our 3-shot kill potential to the body, and in this range, we can now get a 2-shot kill to the head without the CHF barrel, and with the CHF barrel, you only need 1 headshot mixed in with a body shot for a 2-shot kill, which gives you an insane time to kill potential at just 130 milliseconds. So this makes the Goblin significantly more powerful within this short range, especially with that CHF barrel. But again, in order to compensate for that, they did increase the amount of recoil you'll experience, this time horizontal recoil, when using the CHF barrel on this gun. But then for the Model L, they only buffed our base headshot multiplier, although this makes it so we only need 3 headshots at any range to reduce the number of shots to kill. There were no adjustments to the CHF barrel multiplier, however, they did nerf the recoil a little bit with the CHF barrel, and that's pretty much it on that gun. Then we have the AK-74, and we see a pretty similar story here. It's now going to require 3 headshots mixed in with body shots at any range to help, but they only buffed our base headshot multiplier, not the CHF barrel. Then with the VAL, this is the only gun that saw a fairly significant nerf with this update. They reduced our 5-shot kill potential to the body by quite a bit. It went from 21.6 meters down to just 12.7 meters. And while they did nerf our base headshot multiplier on the VAL, they also increased the base amount of damage you're dealing to the body without changing the number of shots to kill to the body, but this ended up resulting in technically a headshot buff to this gun. So it might look like a nerf on paper, but this was a buff overall to headshots that applies to almost every situation. But of course, with that nerf to our 5-shot kill range, I would call this a net nerf to the gun overall. But then finally for assault rifle changes, the Krig C saw several adjustments, not just to headshots, but it did see a headshot buff like the others. So now, without the headshot barrel at any range, it just takes 3 headshots mixed in with body shots to help. However, on top of that, they nerfed our sprint out time a little bit. They just added 10 milliseconds to our sprint out time, which will be hardly noticeable. But more noticeably, they did nerf the recoil on this gun. And as we can see, when we look at the side-by-side comparison here, post-patch, there's more horizontal recoil with those initial several shots that you fire. They're still very close together, still very easy to control, but they drift to the left a lot harder than pre-patch. And then there's more of a sudden cut to the right as well as it kicks upward, including a higher total magnitude of vertical recoil. So I wouldn't say this gun is really inaccurate now after this update, but it is going to be at least a little bit harder to control, especially when it suddenly changes direction on you. And there we go, that wraps it up for all of the assault rifle adjustments. Now let's move on to the SMGs, which generally saw headshot buffs as well, but they typically tried to avoid buffing headshots in their maximum damage range, just because they wanted to avoid like literal insta-melt situations with SMGs, since they already have a fast time to kill in general without headshots up close. But on top of this, with the SMGs, we did have a tendency to see some range improvements as well. So let's dive into the C9, and like I just mentioned, all of our range values were slightly improved with the C9. Also, our headshot potential was improved, at least without the CHF barrel, at all ranges aside from the maximum damage range. It's going to require one less headshot to help in those ranges. And interestingly, while they increased our CHF barrel headshot multiplier, they also reduced base body damage values to the point where the CHF barrel performs exactly like it did pre-patch on the C9. So effectively, they just wanted to target our base headshot potential. Then with the KSV, we see a similar story. All of our range values were slightly improved, and our headshot potential pretty much across the board was improved as well. There are some situations where it's the same number of headshots to help, but more often than not, headshots will be more powerful on this gun, and that's both with or without the CHF barrel. Next, with the Tonto 22, the first thing they did is they improved all of our range values a little bit, common trend with the SMGs. And while they didn't technically touch our headshot multipliers at all, they did slightly improve our damage in our third damage range, which now makes it possible to get a 3-shot kill with 3 headshots, whereas previously you couldn't do that unless you were using the CHF barrel. As for the PP919, we see a very similar story here. They buffed all of our range values slightly, and while they didn't touch the multipliers themselves for headshots, they slightly improved some of our damage values, which gave us slightly better headshot potential in our second and third damage ranges, both with or without the CHF barrel. Then when it comes to the Jackal PDW, we saw our little range improvements, just like all the other SMGs, and we also saw actual improvements to our headshot multipliers with or without the CHF barrel, and this means at all ranges aside from the maximum damage range, they have improved our headshot potential, and it will take at least 1 fewer headshot to kill. Next, with the Kompact 92, we saw those slight range improvements, as well as headshot multiplier improvements with or without the CHF barrel, and this is generally going to be improving your headshot potential across the board. There's just a couple exceptions to that, like without the CHF barrel in your maximum damage range, headshots are still useless for you there. And then finally, for the SMGs, the SAUG also saw some range buffs, as well as improvements to headshots in every situation aside from at longer ranges with the CHF barrel. That one didn't improve, but in every other case, we see better headshot potential, even up close without the CHF barrel. If you land all 4 shots to the head, you can get a 4-shot kill now. Now, that's not all for the SAUG. There were a few other adjustments to some attachments. The first thing is with the Akimbo stock, they increased the damage range penalty from 17% up to 25%. They also increased the hipfire spread penalty from 12% up to 70%, so it's now going to be way less accurate when using Akimbo. And the view kick penalty was increased from 15 to 20%, which means overall they essentially destroyed Akimbo on this gun, which I think is unfortunate. Sure, it was probably a little too powerful on face-off modes, but outside of face-off, I felt the Akimbo attachment was balanced just fine on this gun. But I guess it was just a little bit too dominant in face-off. However, on top of that, they did also nerf rapid fire a little bit. They increased our damage range penalty from 10% up to 15%, and they reduced our rate of fire improvement from 10% down to just 7%. So it is worth noting your range didn't actually really change with rapid fire pre-patch compared to post-patch, because we also saw a base range buff, and it sort of just offsets that. But our rate of fire is noticeably slower, and therefore our time to kill potential isn't going to be improved as much with rapid fire post-patch compared to pre-patch on this gun. And that wraps it up for the SMG category. Now let's finally cover the LMGs. And with the XMG, all they did here is they slightly nerfed the CHF barrel. They just increased the amount of recoil you'll experience when using the CHF barrel without any other adjustments to it. After that, with the PU-21, we saw a very slight damage increase that doesn't change the number of shots to kill to the body at all, and our range also didn't change. However, this improved our headshot potential in that maximum damage range, so we just need 3 headshots to get a 3-shot kill. And then the CHF barrel was also buffed, so now it just requires 2 headshots when using this barrel at any range to improve the number of shots to kill. And then finally, for individual weapon adjustments, with the GPM-G7, they increased our damage values, again, not enough to change the number of shots to kill to the body, but then they also nerfed our damage multipliers to the head with or without the CHF barrel. However, this is another one of those cases where this technically wasn't a nerf, this was a buff overall. And as far as headshot effectiveness goes, this only changes the situations without the CHF barrel in the minimum damage range, so at long ranges, it now requires 3 headshots mixed in with body shots rather than 4. Now, on top of that, they did nerf the CHF barrel's horizontal recoil a little bit, and that's pretty much it. That's going to wrap it up for all of the gun balancing that took place. Next, let's talk about melee weapons a little bit. And with this, across the board, they just improved the time between melee swings. For the knife, this was 7.5% improvement. For the baseball bat, it was a 14% improvement. And with the power drill, it was a 9.5% improvement. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get any pre-patch versus post-patch footage to compare to here. but all of those have improved slightly. Next up, they fixed an issue that I just recently pointed out with the frag grenade versus flak jacket users. What they've done here is they reduced the inner damage radius of the frag grenade, so now a flak jacket user will always survive the frag grenade if they have full health, even if it's right at their feet. So I'm quite happy to see that personally. Next up, another bug I've been pointing out since the beta, I believe, that is really frustrating, especially on the larger maps. This was an issue where if your teammates were too far away from you, their arrows wouldn't show up on the minimap at all. You wouldn't even see them on the edge of your minimap, and this could often make it really difficult to figure out what was going on around the map and to read spawn flips, for instance. They have now fixed this so your teammates' arrows will always appear regardless of how far away they are. Then they just adjusted an issue with the finishing move that was playing the wrong animation. They addressed an issue where players' weapon was missing during a benchmark test, and then there were various stability improvements. And that finally wraps it up for all of the changes that took place for Black Ops 6 multiplayer. There was quite a bit going on with this one, and I've got to say, really solid update. I'm very impressed with all of these changes they've made. Although keep in mind at this point, I'm not sure if they've introduced any new bugs or anything like that. So just looking at the things that they have actually adjusted, I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing. I love the care that they took on individual weapons for those headshot buffs, and I think headshots are in a much better place now where they're generally going to feel at least somewhat useful without being totally overpowered and leading to a lot of situations where somebody just lands one headshot and gets like an instant kill. That's not going to be happening after this update. Headshots are just going to be a bit better. Sniper rifles, they're also going to be a lot more usable after this, and just in general with those visual recoil improvements as well. That really goes a long way, and the guns are feeling noticeably better after this update. Now, of course, these are all just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this patch in those comments down below. Are you guys generally happy with these changes, or maybe not so much? If you enjoyed this one, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.